Let's get there. For all intents and purposes, you can think of EBIT as operating income. This is in thousands, so I'm just going to convert it to millions. 69.54. Their interest expense, 699. So let's just call it 700. Actually, they have a little bit more, so let's add them up. And that's 749. And let's look at their non-cash expense. And we typically get those from the statement of cash flows. Let's see. Obviously, Netflix being a essentially software company, they don't have any depreciation to think of, but they have non-cash expenses. One of them is amortization of content assets. That's a lot of money. And there is depreciation and amortization of property, equipment, intangibles. You know, they have server farms, so there is some depreciation in there. But they also have stock-based compensation expense, e- other non-cash items. These are essentially non-cash items. By the way, in Excel, when you have a selection, you can see summary measures of those right here without making any calculations. Unfortunately, I can't make that bigger. It says sum is 15,582. So if I wanted to calculate TIE, EBIT over interest, which is 6954 divided by 749, and that's about 9 times. So essentially, Netflix is making enough earnings before interest and taxes to pay for 9 years of interest, assuming interest expenditures are going to remain at their current levels. CCR, you know, it's going to be even bigger. The covered cash coverage ratio will always be bigger than it will always be bigger than what you want to call times interest on. But summarizing, as for the measures of long-term solvency, you want things like debt equity ratios. If you're a creditor, to be low, you don't want too much debt, and you want the coverage ratios to be high. As a shareholder, you're kind of in between. On the one hand, you don't want too much debt because if a firm has too much debt, example, Delta Airlines or American Airlines, that produces a lot of financial strain. Can I make enough money to be able to pay, to be able to service my interest? And if things go bad for a few years, the economy goes down, like it did during COVID times, can I survive that? Too much financial debt uh, creates financial fragility. On the other hand, you don't want too little that either, remember, leverage is using other people's money to make money, right? If my business is making money, why not borrow at 6%, 7%, depending upon my credit rating, and invest it into my business that makes me 20%, 30%, whatever. If that's the case, I'm going to enhance the returns for my shareholders. For example, since I already have it, let me open uh, financial statements for NVIDIA. Look at NVIDIA. I mean, they have, let's just look at the current assets. They have about $45 billion worth of current assets. Current assets do not earn much return, right? The best one is the cash and cash equivalents. They're going to earn some interest. Yeah. Even if with the best relationship with the banks, great cash management, I would be surprised if you could earn more than 7%. Okay. On the other hand, look at NVIDIA's business. It's a cash machine. So those liquid assets or low yield assets uh, are essentially reducing the return the shareholders can have. I mean, if you calculate the debt equity ratio for NVIDIA, I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. Their total liabilities are 22. Their equity is 42. So their debt equity ratio is less than about 0.5. That's a very low number. So as a shareholder of NVIDIA, I'm not happy about it. Usually shareholders demand either company pays dividends or repurchase shares. NVIDIA doesn't pay much dividends, but they announced after their last financial statements where they had even a lot more cash. This is as of end of January, 6 months ago. They announced a $50 billion buyback. That means they're reducing their liquid assets by 50 billion and effectively increasing their debt equity ratio. Because they are also decreasing their equity. But when you have a ratio where the numerator and denominator are reduced by the same amount, or in this case, the numerator is increased, denominator is decreased, that ratio is going to go up. So something that is low may be good from the viewpoint of creditors, but it may be viewed as negative from the viewpoint of uh, shareholders. This kind of a, I mean, we will talk about that in Finance 301. What is the optimal capital structure? Now, let's talk about asset efficiency ratios. Why am I not? Okay. These are ratios that basically says either as total assets or particular types of assets, how much assets do you, using $1 worth of assets, how much sales can you generate? Okay. If I can generate a lot of sales with very little assets, which means I'm not putting too much money, then I'm more efficient. I mean, think of it like this. You're studying for a class. If you study only for 3 hours and get an A versus somebody who studies for 30 hours and get an A, you know that the 3 hour person is more efficient. I'm not suggesting that one is better than the others necessarily, because people learn in different ways, but just kind of as an example. If I need only $3 worth of assets to generate $10 worth of sales, that's pretty good compared to another company that needs $5, assuming they're kind of in similar businesses. When we look at the asset efficiency ratios, if you make comparisons across firms, make sure that you're looking at firms in similar businesses because different businesses have different capital requirements. The capital needed for Google is not that much. Yes, Google needs server farms and that sort of stuff. Or these days, they spend a lot of money on NVIDIA chips.